All right, we're live.
We are.
We are live.
Awesome.
So, um, well, hopefully people join us for this conversation. I'm going to give a little bit of an intro as to why we're even having this conversation. So it is, can y'all hear my updates on my computer?
A little bit.
A little bit. I don't know how to turn that off right now.
We'll just roll with it. It's fine.
Okay, roll with it.
It's good.
So it is National Introverts Week. And so I decided to have some introverts on to talk about what it's like to be an introvert. So the pacing of this conversation for those just tuning in might be slower than you're used to. And for those of you tuning in, like, this is live, it's not pre-recorded. So if you have questions or comments, maybe you're an extrovert and you don't understand us introverts, ask away. Maybe you are an introvert and you're like, oh, my people, that I totally resonate with that. Like, let us know, because we'll appreciate the affirmation. And yeah, so here we are. And I'm gonna occasionally like say hello to people who are chiming in. So not to like totally interrupt the vibe, but hey, Mike, thanks for joining us. So maybe to start this discussion, because I think it's actually really interesting. Okay. So for instance, today at one of my jobs, we actually had to take a like personality inventory, and of like a staff of, gosh, I don't know, there was like maybe 10 or 11 12 of us, 10 of us. There were only 3 introverts in the room. And I thought, wow, like that's pretty crazy. And immediately I felt uncomfortable. Like, no wonder none of these people get me. And so I thought the timing of that was really interesting. But it also made me think, okay, so for this particular job, maybe this particular job on the outside would lend itself to extroverts. I'm surrounded by so many of them, you know? So I think it's interesting if we all maybe talk about what we do on a daily basis and how that works for us as an introvert, or maybe does not work for us as an introvert. I think that would be interesting. And hello, Larry. Hi. Who wants to go first?
So,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. That's an introvert thing right there. I'm sorry. First of all, I love those personality inventory tests. I totally geek out on those. And I don't know if that's an introvert quality or not, but I love like digging in and figuring out why I scored a certain way and what that means. And anyway, and then I have to figure out who all my people are to make sure that like I actually know who they are too.
Yeah.
But, I'm a stay-at-home mom, which serves introvertedness pretty well, because when I need a minute, I can just shut the door or send them all to school. When I was teaching, I loved teaching. And I think that built into my extroverted qualities, because I could be goofy, I always favored middle school. And I think it's because they're really real. They're growing into adults, but they're still kids. And it was just easy to have conversations with them. But I would also go home exhausted and needing to recharge, which is hard when you have 4 kids and you're going home to a house full of its own chaos. But
for sure.
Yeah,
I resonate with a lot of that. How about you, Josh?
Well, I'm a pastor, and so there's kind of two sides to that. There's a side of it that's a lot of interacting with people and doing all that kind of thing, and there's also an aspect of that that's a lot of study and reading and or
Hmm.
ruminating and that kind of thing. Which so the people side of things is more of a challenge for me than the other side of things. Like I love to read, I love to like listen to podcasts and stuff like that. And that's something that's very good and benefits me and hopefully benefits my people as well, just because I get to spend that time in preparation and learning and everything. So little column A, little column B with it. The the days when I have lots of meetings are very you get tired and it can be like that. And then when it's time for it to be over for the day, it is over for the day. I don't want the phone to ring. I don't want, any of these things to happen. If I do get to spend time with people who are like friends and family and these sorts of things, that's not as taxing, I would say, on me. But it's just because I'm I'm choosing that, I'm choosing those people
Mm.
and that sort of thing. So it doesn't feel like work as much, I guess. So that's kind of what things look like for me day to day.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I so I work at a church. I am a mom of four, and I'm teaching middle school this year. So, and then also doing the music thing. So, like, it's uh, it is all exhausting, and yeah, I mean, like, there are definitely days like Mondays for me actually are so exhausting because I go from um, teaching a class of middle schoolers to uh, driving over to the church and attending staff and other various meetings all day long. And then I go back to school. And right now, I also teach theater. So then I have like after school rehearsals. And like at the end of Monday, I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to look at anybody. Right? Like I'm just done. And it's interesting you said something, Josh, about choosing. Like if it's your choice, it's less exhausting than when um it's a part of a job or like, and it's not like I don't ever feel forced, right, to participate in meetings, or I don't feel forced to engage with my students, but it is definitely like it's just overwhelming when versus like if there is, for instance, when I get home, like if I can sit down with one person in my family, and that's probably my limit, one person in my family, um, and just engage with them, and it's like my choice that can actually fill me up versus like depleting me. And so I had never thought about that before, about it being like a it's like so like there's a difference for me when I feel thrown into a situation and all these people want to talk to me. I'm like, oh, I'm done. I can't smile anymore. I can't talk anymore. Um, because it doesn't feel like it's my choice. Like I'm being forced to respond. Yes, the bird's back. um, that is awesome. I love it.
He's the best dancer in the family.
This is
Ouch.
awesome.
Excuse
And
me.
here enters our extrovert. This is awesome. Um, yeah. Oh, one other thing, like when I am in, I think people find it odd that that I'm a performer, right? That I like am okay being on stage in front of people, and I'm an introvert. And I find them to be completely different. And I did not think about it until you said it, Josh. I think it's because I have a choice to engage. And like, I already know and have kind of planned out what I'm going to say. And it's not like I am in a situation where I have to be like bouncing from person to person to respond. Like I'm in control of the situation to some degree. And while there might be more, hopefully, sometimes there's not more than one person out there listening, it's still a collective group. I'm not worried about somebody interrupting me in the middle of a sentence. Sometimes like that kind of that can be exhausting for me if I feel like I can't ever if I have something to add, like if I've been internally processing something. Like I think that's what introverts do, right? Like we read the room, we read the body language, we think, we try to figure out what to say before we say it, and then when we finally say it, if we're interrupted or talked over to by an extrovert, that can be like so deflating.
Yeah, I think what you're describing is kind of the difference between monologue and dialogue. And that is like when you are in front of people, there is feedback, at least physical feedback that you can see. Sometimes it's verbal feedback, sometimes these sorts of things. But as you mentioned, you are the one in control of the situation. And so that's why, frankly, I think introverts can make very good, performer, anybody who stands up in front of people and talks or sings or whatever. Introverts can be really good at that. And it does sound a little counterintuitive until you look at it from the perspective of monologue versus dialogue.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, I never thought of it like that. It's interesting.
So let me just check in with a few people who are chiming in. Roger Carlson, hello, by the way, Roger, says you are almost forced to be in extroverted situations, ?
Yeah. And I think too, it is kind of a joke that like introverts, the thing they talk about the most is being introverts. And so there's a little, bit of a stereotype, but each of us, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert or somewhere in between, you are forced to participate in situations that are the opposite of how you are inclined. And so it does happen. You are forced into those situations, but then extroverts are also forced into introvert type situations too. So it's we don't want to play the victim too much, but we are doing a podcast about it. So
It is National Introverts Week for a reason. Let's see. Bob Simpson, hello, Bob, says that bird though. I'm telling you, the bird's gonna be the main reason people watch this.
He was just too noisy. I had my daughter put him away because he was not going to let me have any words.
He's such an extrovert. So, follow-up question. What do you think as an introvert you add to the group dynamic?
So I think for me, I hope that there's a level of thoughtfulness that I can bring to a situation, or anytime we're hammering something out or figuring out a problem or brainstorming or stuff like that, anything that comes out of my mouth, I've already thought about a dozen times before I say it. And so that, to me, the best compliment that somebody can give me is to say that I'm thoughtful. And so that's kind of the way I look at it, is just hopefully I bring that level of attention and attention to detail and stuff like that. Hopefully I can bring that to some kind of situation like that.
I was thinking the word that I thought of was focus, which I think is along those same lines. Which is interesting because I also deal with ADHD, as does 5 of my introverted family members. We're a hot mess over here, but but I think we just we're good listeners, and so we're able to bring focus to a conversation or to a situation where my extroverted child cannot. They're all over the place, and so to be able to kind of bring it back around.
Yeah, I think I if like it can combine your two thoughts. Like sometimes especially in like a meeting brainstorming kind of situation, right? Lots of ideas flowing, or maybe it's some kind of, we're trying to solve a problem or something. And yeah, I feel like when I do finally speak up, I'm not just letting the first thing that flies out of my mouth come out. Like I've put some thought into it. I do think I'm getting a little bit braver with that though. But I do think, like, especially if it's in a room full of extroverts and there are a lot of ideas coming out, there's sometimes like they miss each other, right? And I think introverts have the ability to just sit back and be okay observing. And I think there've been plenty of times where as an introvert I can go like, oh, I totally see what's happening here. Like, you mean this, you mean this, and you're totally not hearing each other, but they haven't paused long enough to like take a breath and realize it. And so I think in the group dynamic, having an introvert to be able to just big picture view instead of always being in it. Like, so if it's a matter of like being in the boat or standing on the shore, like the introvert's like standing on the sideline watching, and they can tell like, oh, that boat right there is, 10 feet ahead of the other one, and they're yelling at each other. Like, they just need to turn around and face each other. But if you're in the boat, you can't like, you're just in it. You're like going and doing and saying. And so I think introverts can add a lot in that kind of space. Bob says, this is Bob who said that bird though, says, I'm enjoying this. I'm a total extrovert, and this is giving me some great insight. Bless all of you. So there you go.
Thanks, Bob.
And Jason Maroney, who we all know and love, asks, at what point does being an introvert become antisocial or recluse? How do you guard against that? And then Roger just said, just so it doesn't turn into agoraphobia.
Yeah, I think it does. It's back to this idea of just we do have to operate in the other world sometimes, and yes, it can be taxing and exhausting and stuff like that at times. I can tell you this: like, if you are in a social situation, okay, how do I want to say this? If you're on a date with somebody who is an introvert and you are an introvert, and I'm a guy, so I feel like if the conversation is dragging, I need to be the person who keeps the conversation moving. And that can be really difficult if the other person is an introvert and you don't know each other very well and you're trying to figure out something to talk about or something like that. So those kinds of situations, it can be rough, but you do need to try. You do need to put yourself out there. You can't just hide behind your label. That's just part of being an adult and being a human being and doing those sorts of things.
I think one thing that I struggle with is once I have my people, I'm good and I don't need any other people. And so then I struggle with reaching out or responding when other people are reaching out to me. So it's definitely something that's on my radar to not become standoffish. I don't want to be the person that I'm like, oh, she's kind of a jerk. So but it is hard too, the longer that I invest in specific relationships, then if that person happens to be there, we're in a group setting, then I really struggle to branch out and talk to other people because my person's here and I'm good. I don't need other people. And I struggle with that, sometimes in small groups, but at places like church, even where, oh, there she is. And I kind of beeline that way. And people are like, crush on. And I'm like, hey, I need to get over there. I'm really uncomfortable right now. So that's definitely a struggle. And then becoming reclusive. It's so easy to stay home because I don't need to be out of my house to have any kind of fulfillment. So sometimes I do get stuck in those loops of, I don't need to go today. We're not out of milk yet. Sorry.
That reminds me of a line of dialogue from the TV show Freaks and Geeks, which didn't last very long, but whatever. And the male character, it's a teenage boy, and the girl he likes doesn't like him back or whatever. And she says she wants to be friends, and he's like, I don't even need any more friends. I already have 2.
Exactly right.
Yes. Kresha, like, it makes me feel so good to know you do the same thing where you're like beelining to other people. And it's not because I don't like, it's overwhelming for me. And sometimes I just can't handle it. And I need to go stand by my person because that's where I feel safe.
Right.
And I have been called lots of things because I come across as closed off and like sometimes it can come off as like that I'm stuck up and too good for everybody else, and like totally not how I feel. If anything, I feel not able to rise to the standards and abilities of everybody else. So I just kind of want to go be off by myself and where it's safe.
Right, where people aren't watching me.
Yes.
Not looking at me.
Yes. And, I think, Josh, you said it about like, we all have to push ourselves, right? Like the world's going to throw us in situations where we have to put ourselves out there, speak up a little bit more, that kind of thing. And, I had the thought, well, we would say the same thing of the extrovert, right? Like, an extrovert can't hide behind the label, well, I'm just an extrovert, and not ever listen to anybody, right? Like that wouldn't be good for anybody, including the extrovert, right? And so I think that's a pretty, we all are going to be stretched, no matter if we're an extrovert or introvert or even somewhere in the middle, like, we're all going to be pushed. Roger says, I guess, too introverted and or too extroverted. Probably extremes to both, which is, I think, pretty true. Mm-hmm. But it is easy, I think, either way to try to hide behind the label, like you said, Josh, when we should kind of force ourselves to talk more to other people we don't know.
Well, and creating balance, and knowing that it's not a permanent situation if we're uncomfortable, right? But eventually the conversation will end and we can go back to our space. But that's funny. I always struggle with, how do I get out of this conversation? How do I end it? Like, I'm here and I'm having this and we're talking and now we're just staring at each other awkwardly because neither of us knows what to do next.
Oh my gosh. I feel like that happens to me all the time. Oh. So, follow-up question. As introverts, that's all I can speak to because I don't know what it's like for extroverts. So I'll just put that out there. As introverts, we can be in situations that drain us, right? Like we are drained. And I think the way I've heard extroverts explain it is that when they are around a lot of people, it's like super energizing. They just, it fills them up. While a lot of people being around that can drain us. So what do you do after a draining event or situation? What do you do to re-energize?
I Netflix binge.
Heck yeah.
In my room with the door closed, and if my kids are being particularly obnoxious, I go ahead and lock that door. I need mindless. I can't engage anymore when I reach that point. So I just need to be left alone, create that space for myself.
Yeah, I think it is similarly. Just do something that is not that you don't have to think about. That you don't, um, like I'll watch some TV shows. I'll watch some reality TV shows, not the really trashy ones, but just the moderately trashy ones. But it's something that you can turn your brain off, and or just it's kind of like chewing gum for your brain. It doesn't get you anywhere. It doesn't do anything, but it is just a way for you to kind of decompress or that sort of thing. Or maybe a phone call to somebody who I like to talk to, and just maybe review what happened or tell them a story about something that somebody did that was weird or whatever, whatever. But something like that, I think would be what I do. What do you do, Angie?
Yeah, I mean, I binge watch a lot of things. And Kresha, you're probably like similarly, by the time all 4 of my children are done needing things or telling me about their day, which I love to hear, but it can just be a lot. Sometimes I'm just, it's late, and like I will stay up past when I should stay up just because I need that time. So it can be like, it can kind of bite me in the butt the next day, right? Like I'm tired, I'm exhausted, but I would be more tired and exhausted if I didn't give myself that mindless break. And I think, some people would say, well, why don't you just go to sleep? It's like a totally different, it's just different. It's very different.
I've been noticing that. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
A lot lately that I'm staying up way too late, and it's the same thing. I started working part-time at a preschool, our church's preschool, and I think that's just kind of pushed my whole schedule because I'm totally engaged for those 6 hours. And so it's backing on the other end that I need those hours still. And so the only place I can get them is late at night after everybody else is in bed.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how draining people can be. That comment I didn't think about enough before I said it.
I'm not the only one.
Okay, let me check in with some of these comments. Sherry says, if you don't mind the assumption, as a pastor's spouse, a worship leader, and musician, folks can seem to put unfair and borderline violating expectations on you, like your vocations strip you of autonomy. That's heavy. I think while from my experience, I think while I have felt a little bit of expectation to be something I'm not in different circumstances, for instance, like when people think I'm being totally rude and avoiding them, and I'm like, dude, I was just so borderline to get the heck out of there because I just couldn't. Like I could not function. I think I can understand. I can get enough outside of myself to go like, yeah, that probably did appear very rude. So one, I think I can at least acknowledge that. I think the times when that has happened, though, more often than not, when I follow that up with like those people who think those things don't actually know me. And so like if there is some kind of follow-up, if I deem it necessary, right? Like sometimes I'm like, well, haters gonna hate. Like people are gonna be upset at how I am. There's only so much I can do about that. I don't want to be a people pleaser and be something I'm not, to the point of exhausting myself trying to like go pick up all these pieces of misunderstood whatever. But more often than not, and sometimes it's 5 years later because it takes 5 years to slowly, make those interactions happen in a way that isn't overwhelming. For the people who stick around long enough to actually get to know me in 5 years, I've had so many conversations where they're like, you know what? At first I kind of thought you were rude, but now like I just see that you're super thoughtful, like you said, Josh, that like you're totally like reading people, and they start to see me in a different way than just what's on the surface after a 5-second miss of an interaction. And I think the more that has happened, the more comfortable I have become in just letting those be. I'm not going to stress about it. I'm not going to feel like I'm not fulfilling the perceived expectation of my vocation. Like the people who really care will figure it out.
Yeah.
And we'll get to have those conversations, Let's see. Beatrice says, I love to have that mindless break. I always need it. So we have support there. Jason says, after big social days, I do a lot of internal reflection and processing, and sometimes verbally with a good listener. I think that's why we need that mindless time. Yeah, sometimes I feel like as introverts, we process a lot. And sometimes, I know if I'm in a room of a lot of people, that's like input overload. Mm-hmm. Like I'm taking in a lot of input because I'm trying to read everybody in the room. It doesn't matter if they even talk to me. Sometimes just being in that big of a room there's all this nonverbal information coming at me that it's like my processor gets jammed and I'm like, but I think it can help to like then verbally process that out with somebody and have them kind of enter into that jumbled up space, and that can sometimes re-energize me. But I think it's got to be the right person who is willing to kind of do that and be safe and gets it. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't have any more follow-up questions.
Oh.
So do y'all have any, like that kind of puts us in a little bit of a bind. Do y'all have any last minute comments? What is the one thing as an introvert that you want to say to other introverts or to an extrovert? You have the space. Nobody's going to interrupt you. Nobody's going to it's your.
Yeah. So I guess what I would say is I do think there's a way that kind of the introvert and the extrovert can kind of rhyme, and that is that you do have if one person's a good talker, the other person there's a good if they're an introvert, there's a good chance they're a good listener, and so those things work well together. I think you see it more often than not with a husband and a wife. One of them is an introvert and one of them is an extrovert, and so that's something that I hope we can all see the value in the other, the other way that some people are, and appreciate it. And that's one of the ways that, I don't know, it's one of the things that makes life fun, is that not everybody's the same. And so we can have those opportunities to have interactions with people the same as us and people who are different than us. And I think the ones with people who are different than us are usually more interesting. And so I think that's something that everybody can take away, is just lend an ear to the other person, or talk to them, or have these interactions, and it's a good thing, and we all benefit from it.
Yeah.
I would just say, I'm not being rude, I promise. If I cut and run, it's not you, it's me.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Yes. Yeah, I think, y'all both know my husband. He is an extrovert, and like, he has saved me in so many situations where I needed, like you said, Kresha, like sometimes you're like, I don't know how to end this conversation. I don't know how to get out of it. I'm like, ah. And like, I think he has developed a keen sense of seeing when that is happening. And he's got no problem like popping into that conversation and taking over. And I'm like, oh, phew. So like, I think there is definitely we need each other, right? If it was a room full of introverts, I don't know that we would get very far, right?
We'd all look like your balloons there, Angie.
Yeah. Aww. Yeah. So I think that's a good word. And I agree with Kresha, not to just steal everybody's thoughts, but like, if you have an introvert in your life, be patient with them. They're trying, and they might have a lot of really good insight into problems or different situations, or insight into conversations, that if there's somebody quiet in your group, it might be worth pausing and asking them, hey, what do you think? Because sometimes we need a little extra encouragement to speak up. So
if we're quiet, we're usually thinking.
Right, yeah.
Or plotting.
Or plotting. That sounds like a great note to end on. Well, thank you everybody who tuned in. And for those of you who got involved in the conversation too, that's awesome. And we really appreciate it. Thank you, Kresha, and thank you, Josh, for joining me and being willing to go outside your comfort zone and do a live stream.
Always.
Thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. And we'll just keep trucking on as introverts or extroverts out there. And we'll see y'all next time.
Sounds good.
Bye-bye.